Aloha and welcome to Connection to the Cosmos with your host, me, Dr. Lisa Thompson, where I have out of this world conversations with extraordinary people. Today, I'm really excited to have on Dr. Melanie Keller. We're going to bring her on in just a moment. But first, a couple of announcements. If you have not had the opportunity to grab my free 20-minute meditative journey to meet your galactic family and guides, make sure you do so on my website, mysticmanta.com or drlisajthompson.com. Also, if you are in the healing industry, healing field, have a business, I am leading my Galactic Ascension Channel Certification Program, February 22nd and 23rd online. And then I am also leading my Galactic Retreat here on the Big Island of Hawaii, April 30th to May 4th of next year. All of that information is on my website, mysticmanta.com and drlisajthompson.com. And then if you're coming to Hawaii any other time of the year, specifically to the Big Island, Kona side, then come visit me on one of my Big Island UFO tours where you will see the night sky in a whole new way using the Generation 3 military night vision goggles. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to bring on Melanie. Hello, Melanie.
Hello.
So happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, let me share with our audience your bio because I think, well, you are the first naturopathic doctor that I've had on the show, and you're more than that. So Dr. Melanie Keller is a globally acclaimed naturopathic doctor and spiritual innovator. As a clear channel, she channels New Earth intelligence, multidimensional medicine, and Merlinian technology, offering a unique blend of spiritual and medical expertise. Featured in top-tier media outlets such as Forbes, Business Insider, Well+Good, and ABC's The List TV, Dr. Melanie is a sought-after authority and speaker. She advises 6+ figure leaders, integrating epigenetic and energetic intelligence and Merlinian technology to enhance their gifts and support their missions. Part of her sacred mission includes a passion for hemp, cannabinoids, and apitherapy, and she envisions bee sanctuaries on hemp farms. Well, wow. So good. I'm, again, so happy to have you here. We met several months ago in one of Mother Malia's courses, and I'm just so happy to have you here and to have a fellow soul sister on.
Same.
So, now, I'm super curious because I don't know this about you actually. Like, what's your background in terms of how did you grow up? Spiritual, religious, something else? So we can understand kind of the journey that you have been on to get into this work.
Yes, spiritual. I grew up in a family household that had come from a very religious background, and so it was very much like, we want you to learn about everything. And I also was growing up in a small town in Southeast Alaska where people traveled a lot and they would come in and show the different cultures and different religions. And so it was nice to be able to be exposed to that at an early age.
Okay. Well, and so did you go right into knowing that you wanted to be a naturopathic doctor, or did you have a windy path?
Oh, it's very windy. It's like I was on the 10-year plan when I graduated high school. Yeah, and it was by way of all of my own health problems and then looking at different graduate programs, what would be the best way. Because at the time, it wasn't covered. We didn't have any student loans initially when I was initially looking. But I had a friend from high school who had gone through naturopathic school. So yeah, I fell into it later in life. I was the non-traditional student. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, and did you like growing up? Were you did you go to a naturopathic doctor? Like, how did you stumble on this? Or because, like I did, my mother,
Okay.
she, we were into very holistic, alternative medicine, and so I'm curious about that for you.
Well, I grew up in Southeast Alaska, Haines, 80 miles north of Juneau. So I was raised, I mean, I'll call it the granola family, right? We had the Wonder Bread and then the granolas, I guess. And our neighbors, they started the food co-op. And so I was always exposed to that and looking in catalogs and looking at botanicals and being like, ooh, what do I want to try? And So there's that. And, mountain spring water, my family were commercial fishing. So that's, I always say, like, I have the Forrest Gump list of everything you can do with salmon, which I'm now very grateful for. But, when you're like,
Yeah.
oh, canned salmon again.
Right.
So there's that. And then I struggled with severe migraines. And so it went from whoever would kind of come in through town, and then in the summer times, right, there's those transient gurus who would come through and be like, oh, okay, let's try this, let's try that. At one point I expressed what was going on with me health-wise, and my mom like jumps on the on the phone to Juneau, to the health food store, and it was like it got flown up in the little Betty Holly killer plane, like these adventure planes, and it took all the things and nothing helped me. And, yeah. And then I went the conventional route through my early teens and or 20s, when you're in school and it's take birth control for everything. Right.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I really buckled down and was really reaching out to conventional medicine, and nothing could help. And they just didn't really care. I don't know if they didn't care. They didn't take the time to solve anything, right? So you just kind of spin in your cycle of self-care. It was really difficult at that time, I would actually say. And of course, naturopathic medicine was considered crunchy and weird and wackadoodle, which I'm all about that.
Okay. Well, so then, so did you have a traditional practice? Because I know you're more than just that now. So how did that path kind of unfold?
Sure. Well, so in school, there's even a joke that we're told, because the naturopathic school is down the hill, and then the OHSU in Portland, Oregon is up on the hill, right? So they're like above us, right? And then also, if you're familiar with nature or homeopathy, there's thuya trees, cedar trees that surrounded our campus. And thuya in homeopathics are like kind of being the having been bullied, having been suppressed. Like, those are some keynotes in that remedy. So it's really interesting to me how that was like kind of, yeah, we know, and we're the down the hill, and I was like, this is interesting. Yet on the flip side, everything was so evidence-based, which I do appreciate. But now that I'm more in tune with my channel, a lot of it is just not real. Evidence is skewed, evidence is manipulated. And at the same time, we always had to come across with I suggest or recommend this, and here's why, and here's the studies to prove it, or to back me up. Not going to a traditional herbalist and saying, oh, you've done this for hundreds of years. Oh no, we had to have the double-blind placebo study. So I would say you're kind of you're trained in that allopathic yet conventional way. So I started my practice in that way, in the sense that I was helping people with irritable bowel syndrome who were unaware that their underlying cause in about 60 to 80% of IBS is an overgrowth of bacteria in the small intestine. So people may know the acronym SIBO, however anybody wants to say it. And my mentor had just written a book. He had gone on sabbatical, written this book for functional gastroenterology, and there was just about 2 paragraphs in his book. And even the researchers who were speaking on SIBO, it was really minuscule at the time. This is over 12 years ago. And in IBS, it's kind of, and I say this from my conventional colleagues, so they say it's kind of an eye roll when it comes to IBS, because it's just so chronic and it can take forever, and the patient's cases can be quite difficult. And so when we had a symposium and had over 500 people show up, he was like, who are you people? And because typically I don't get this attention, at major gastroenterology conferences. And that was really the leading we started a lot of the groundwork, I guess, as to now how many people are aware of SIBO. I like to say everybody in your yoga teacher knows about SIBO now, which is great, but it can also be some people can go down that windy path and not really get anywhere, or they can spin in the hamster wheel of protocols.
Okay. So then when did you start kind of branching out to like really be more intuitive rather than the evidence-based?
Oh, well, I've always been intuitive. I've always had, I would more so say like a mediumship. So even when I was in medical school, we had a family friend that passed, and he came to me very clearly, and I was able to like, I told my family about it first, and then they told the family, which was really comforting for them, because sometimes I didn't know, I was still in my own world of like, oh, people are judging me, or people will think I'm weird, or they'll discredit my credentials if I share this.
Mm-hmm.
And yet when I was with patients, sometimes when a case was really difficult or not getting anywhere, and it would just come through really loudly and clearly, I'd have to kind of, again, kind of, how do I broach this conversation? But typically there was enough rapport there. And it's even more so when I do put my hands on people. I say I have like MRI hands, like I can just really see almost too much information to some degree. And so it's nice when I do have a bit of distance, even to just kind of say, okay, what's the main thing that's channeling through right now that could unlock or help this person reach a new level of results. And so when I finally did open that up to a few individuals, and I mean, it was pretty, there's this one case where I actually wish I had a video of before the woo, and then after when we had our session, because it was like night and day, just even how they presented themselves and to see how much improvement they got health wise. So I was like, oh, wow, this is great. And then I went down a path of epigenetics. And again, there were some people who didn't understand it, or like, oh, yeah, that's just more acronyms and more information to remember. For example, MTHFR, if people are familiar with that. And what I found was that people could make these assumptions of, oh, okay, if you have MTHFR, therefore you need this kind of B vitamin. And it wasn't that simple. In fact, it could even make it worse. And so I initially called myself an epigenetic intuitive, because I wanted to get even more like, hey, just because your labs or your genetics come back a certain way does not equal you're broken, you're wrong, or anything like that. In fact, it's like, no, you just really actually have to have somebody who knows you, hears you, listens. I call it watching the movie, right? When you're in the movie, you don't see it, but when you watch the movie, you can go, oh, there's an alien behind you.
Yeah. So real quick, because maybe not all of the listeners or watchers know what epigenetics is.
Yeah.
Because, even I were a biologist, but, and then not everyone knows the whatever MTHR, what that is. So if you can just quickly just describe
Yes. So I like to say genetics are what people know as is not changeable. There are some very specific conditions that you cannot change, or, birth defect, etc. And epi, which means around or above, means you can change it. So a good example is if you were raised in a smoking household or not. You can take identical twins, they can both be in a smoking household, and they might have different outcomes. So that's generally a good explanation. MTHFR is just one of these enzyme pathways. It has to do with folic acid, for example, is put in our prenatal vitamins. But folic acid is synthetic, and quite frankly is a poison. In my training, and a mentor who is very adamant about this. Whereas folate, which is what is intended to help, because that folic acid is helping to prevent neural deformities and defects. Really what we need is folate. So what should be in prenatal vitamins is a form of folate, and where we get folate is through leafy greens predominantly. Okay. So a lot of times we're in a society now where not everybody's drinking green juices and eating abundant salads, but I suppose this audience maybe.
Perhaps. Okay. Well, so then working with the clients. So then tell me more about the Merlinian technology.
Well, that came from working with our mentor, where I had always wondered, I guess in a sense, but then also not when you have always channeled, I didn't really necessarily have to put a name or entity to it. What I refer to it as is like I see things like a holographic computer, and somebody's genes might come forward, their past, they're somebody on the other side, their galactic, like I just kind of see all of these things that could be and had been overwhelming when I was younger. I think that may have been where some of my migraines were stemming from, and I'm talking like blackout migraine.
Wow. Okay.
And so when she mentioned, she says, "Well, you're channeling Merlin," and I was like, "The magician?" Like I was like, "Hang on a second, what?" And I really wasn't into that. Like I didn't know much about Merlin. I wasn't a Harry Potter person. It was so new to me. However, Merlin was like, I'm not a character. I'm not this fictional character that people think of when you say that name. It's a technology. And so if you think about what he's presented in literature and how he just shows up, and how he's in the books, and he really was just saying, I'm kind of like the cloud, like I'm this cloud of consciousness where you have access to all information. And I think that's what can almost be challenging, is that I have to be here on earth with these heavy, kind of darker or thick, not real, I'm saying that lightly because that is difficult to say.
Yeah.
And yet I have access to what is. And so that can be, it can sometimes be a challenge, but when I'm working with people one-on-one or with a group or specifically with a business, it can be exactly what is like, aha, that's what just helped us expand exponentially, Yeah. So those that do understand or are gravitating to it or are drawn to it, it's again, that frequency match.
Mm-hmm.
That is just magic.
Okay. So, I guess I'm curious how you actually work with clients and what kind of clients come to you, because you do have this very, well-rounded background, but then, you do more than just helping people get healthy, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I have both sides. Sometimes what happened was I had a lot of founders, CEOs, more so owners than operators of businesses. They might own multiple businesses and they were having health challenges. And generally they'd be like, well, you're my doctor, but I would be asking them very advanced questions about their business. Are you in the middle of an acquisition right now? Is that why your reflux kicked back up? And they'd be like, well, how did you know, or they just would assume I don't understand acquisitions. But if I could, I would get very, very detailed on a due diligence or, like something where they're like, how do you know that? And again, kind of based on the person or the report. So yeah, sometimes they just wouldn't ask. It would be more so men. They'd just be like, okay, she gets it, And then on the flip side, having more patients or people who came to me for their health problems that want the energy work, that know that they've been through everything. Like I said, I went from being the leading expert and had people from around the world, packed schedule where it was kind of a lot of the same thing, to then now that it's a lot of people are aware of SIBO, people are choosing those protocols, and they go, look, I've done all of the things, you've got something different. And I know that there's more to it. I wrote an article for the Townsend Letter in 2015 that even specifically discusses about, like, say, trauma in females. And oftentimes it's just not ever brought up. Somebody can spend time treating SIBO for years. And I'm like, it's not the gluten. It's not the FODMAP. It's the fact that either you don't know, or sometimes you're avoiding your history is part of this, right? And so you can pick that up energetically really quick. And some people are into it and some are not. And I really got to that. It used to be optional, right? Like, oh, by the way, I do energy work and I'm a medical intuitive. And some people are like, only if I'm desperate, and then now more so it's like, no, that's the exact client that I actually want, is the person that's like, I'm coming to you for this.
Okay. Well, and I love that because as I understand, most of our illnesses and things are underlying emotional causes, right?
Yes.
Yes. So, um, okay. So when and real quick, because I think, most people are under the assumption that, you have to like physically go to a naturopathic doctor, but you work virtually.
Yeah. Yeah. I was sharing with you that I always have. I was even doing it before when you're like, oh, is this, kind of almost okay? So I call it like rogue medicine in the sense that I'm like, I've always done it my way for that person to get results, whether it's even been off-label use of hormones, etc. So yeah, and it's been really nice because, like I said, I've had people from all over the world when you can reach that many people.
Yeah, which is pretty incredible because, when I think about going to a naturopath, like I think of I have to go to the doctor's office, right? And so, because you do have that intuition highly tuned in and the medical intuitive part, then I get, it does make sense that you could work virtually with people. Because I think the traditionally trained ones, they would not be able to do that, would they?
Yeah, it's pretty common now for people to do telehealth. I think it's also like what people get. Yeah, what's the program, right? Oh, I have to build, and it has to be a clinic, and then they're kind of stuck maybe in that lease and all the things. But also, I initially was very hands-on. I love to do like I can do, you call it chiropractic manipulation, but we're also trained in naturopathic manipulation techniques. So that was like that was what I was known for. I'm very good at it. I have a background in massage therapy, and I also did visceral manipulation where you can actually move the organs and fascia, etc. And yeah, I actually experienced it with one of the people from our group where they have a background in myofascial release. And I found it so interesting because I'm in tune with my body and muscle attachments, etc., that how much they were able to channel. And I was like, whoa, I actually am feeling, whoa, I feel a shift in my body. So again, the right frequency match is open to that as well. And or I'll teach them. I'll say, here's what we're going to do, and I'll demonstrate how to do a manipulation because it's fairly easy. And when you can see their eyes, like when you can see that they can get relief from a manual technique by themselves, that's more empowering than I got to go back to her. Oh, I got to schedule it all in. It's more like I'll teach them or I'll have their spouse there or whoever is there and show them how to do the technique as well.
Okay. So when you're talking about that you're channeling New Earth intelligence,
yeah,
tell me more about that.
Well, I mean, I'll be honest with you, even in the spiritual world, I am seeing a lot of still some of this heaviness of like, and don't get me wrong, I've been here. It's all part of where somebody's path has led them. But like, even in astrology, right? Like having Mercury retrograde be the reasoning or the explanation. I was like, well, is that not programming from Roman beliefs? And again, I think we're also disconnected from the sky, which I love what you do. It was getting people outside at night and seeing what the original people of that island were looking up and seeing and why they are such a spiritual culture, right? My family lived on the Big Island for 8 years, and same was in Alaska. Like they have very, very deep roots. And yeah, sorry, I just went off. Went to my planet there for a moment.
Okay, New Earth intelligence.
Yeah, I see that people are still stuck in this old world. And so I see that in medicine, it's got to be this way. There's no other way. And if you can't prove it, I don't want to talk to you about it. That can even be in cannabinoids. It can be with apitherapy. Oh, no, there's absolutely no way that that's possible. So to me, that's old world. Whereas the new earth intelligence is not only what we are catching a glimpse of now, but there's even more. And that's what the Merlinian technology is. It's like, look, we have, and we're seeing it, where look at the advances that we have in such a short period of time. Where is that coming from? So I fully believe we've had visitors, that are providing us this information. And because I look at a time frame where I grew up, where I was like, oh, we went from a corded phone to newly getting a microwave to all of a sudden
Yeah.
I got this AI iPhone 16, So that's where I'm like, yeah, there's more to this. We're just a little primitive still in being able to receive it. And like I say, it's not as easy to be, I don't want to say I'm a chosen one, but I feel like the light has turned on. And I understand the previous me who would have thought this me is maybe a little out there, but I'm ready for it. And I'm ready to share it.
Okay. Yeah. I resonate with that because it took me having to move to Hawaii to fully step into the light and show my full weirdness. Yeah. So what is apitherapy? I've never heard of that.
Bee therapy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, for example, I have a dear friend who suffered. It's actually Lyme, which took a very long time to discover. But bee therapy, venom therapy, has completely changed their life.
Interesting. So you actually get the venom from the bees?
Bee stinging. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. She had a family of her bees, and she, by way of the sting, the immune system responds. And it's like I said, it's not very common, and it doesn't work for everyone.
Okay.
And some people can have thoughts on that. In fact, she knew how much I've always loved bees, and I was like, whatever works for like I come from that non-judgment place.
Mm-hmm.
You never know what's going to work for someone. Like in the sense of when they're really reaching out. There was a point where her husband reached out to me, and she had been released from hospitals 3 times. She was in such excruciating pain he could barely even watch it, and I actually gave them a suggestion of just even a inhalation of CBD, because they were in a state that had cannabinoids access, but it wasn't really common to have just a CBD only. I wasn't encouraging anything with THC, just with CBD. And she said within 1 inhalation her pain decreased by 50%. Within 2 she was out of pain, and this was having been hospitalized and nothing was working.
Okay.
And so even just kind of walking them through how to communicate this with the staff, how to advocate.
Yeah. So let's talk more about that, about the cannabinoids, and because I know there are some people who are still like, no way. And then others are like, yes. So, and I think it's an interesting distinction that you made between the CBD versus the THC.
Mm-hmm.
And so explain a little bit more about that for people who aren't fully aware, because I think people have a lot of judgment around this because they're not educated.
Yeah. I'm thinking of like a botanical parallel. So peppermint. We can, you might know peppermint as a whole, but it's the mentha, which is the isolated chemical structure that can be antispasmodic, anti-inflammatory, right? So we're taking a plant similar to peppermint,
Mm-hmm.
and there are different chemical constituents within it. That's why I say cannabinoids instead of cannabis specifically, because you have THC, then you have THC A, B, there's variations and breakdowns of these chemical structures. So more people might know about CBD and that being, we'll say, anti-anxiety or help with sleep, but there are actually more that have even been studied. For example, CBN, as in Nancy, there is a company that's done a double-blind study that shows the CBN itself can be very helpful for sleep. And interestingly enough, at a certain dose. So they tried it at 25 milligrams, 50, and 100, and they arrived at 50. So more is not always better. And so sometimes when people think, oh, I'll just never try that because it's intoxicating, is usually the word that's said, or I can't do that because of my job, etc. And I like to inform them, are you aware of CBN, which has nothing to do, like is not going to get you in any trouble, and it could actually help you sleep. CBG can help you with energy and anxiety. And so there are these different forms of the plant. Now, as a purist, there are some out there that say, oh no, you have to have it all together. So we'll refer to it as the entourage effect. So some people, it does work better to have more components or a teeny tiny little bit of THC that might not be intoxicating, but it helps amplify or turn on that CBD even to work better for someone. And again, you can do testing to find out what is more personalized to you via epigenetic testing.
Okay, very interesting. And so that kind of work, are you into like you prescribe certain things with the cannabinoids or?
I'm not in a position to prescribe if it does have the THC intoxicating. It depends on the state. In Washington, I can. If I chose to have a license there, I can. It's more so that people who are coming to me already on it, especially in California, you can have it delivered like pizza, right?
Okay.
So I was at least the doctor that they could tell, yes, I'm actually taking this. Yes, this is how it helps my inflammatory bowel disease. And then I just happen to be the person that's like, oh, what strain, what kind? And I could look up the terpenes and I could say, oh, this is why, this is how this is helping you. That was like a few years ago. Now we have this very specific test that can help identify it too.
Okay. So what are your feelings on the psychedelic mushrooms and some of those other kinds of natural, we'll call them natural medicines?
Yeah, I again, having been raised in Southeast Alaska and actually part of a native group, it's interesting. Like I danced with them for 13 years, so am I aware? I have this high respect for, say, in shamanism, that the shaman is the one that actually typically takes the ayahuasca, and it's not the individual that's going on the journey. So there is a part of me that really does like to acknowledge the true traditions of things. But I also understand how people stumbled upon eating the wrong mushroom and then went, whoa, what just happened to me there, right? Do I think that these things could and should be available? Absolutely. I just think that it can swing into what is your intent? What is the purpose? Who is helping you? Who's facilitating it? I happen to have a colleague that I graduated with who is really at the top of this. And so I just have a high respect for knowing how it can be done. Not to say that anyone is doing anything wrong. I just want to know your person, know your facilitator. And I'm here in Mexico right now, and I've been told that, oh yeah, if you walk down, if you go kind of saunter around Tulum, you're going to be offered ayahuasca when you go into a store, or that happened to someone. I'm like, now that's a little bit, no, thank you.
Yeah. That doesn't sound very safe.
Yeah, but have I also talked to a biotech company that is working to manufacture very specific, yes, in Canada, where it's, they're very open and moving forward. And my parents now live on Vancouver Island, and I was watching the news and they're like, oh, we're having this psilocybin study. Come on down and get your tea bags, and I was like, well, why are they running this study in June when it's sunny and everybody wants to be outside? Maybe they should do this in February when we might get some other data.
Right. Exactly. So, okay. So I'm going through either perimenopause or in menopause right now. What advice, and my demographic is in this age range as well. Mm-hmm. So is there something natural that can help balance those hormones and like really keep the hot flashes? I'm a boiler maker, apparently. Like I am just always on fire.
Oh, I was just describing this to a girlfriend of mine yesterday, and I said I was actually on hormone replacement therapy. I was working with a gynecologist, and I was dosing it improperly. So I was on testosterone, and here he was educating me. He's like, you got to be really careful of the roid rage. And I was like, oh yeah, You mean like I'm about an Incredible Hulk it right now. Um, and I had a hot flash in the taxi with him, and oh my gosh, I just wanted to rip out of my own skin. And I was looking at him going, could it be that my testosterone is converting, you know? And I was like, because this is hell. And so I've only had that one experience that was hormone induced. So I like to just start off there. Now, I do have a product that I absolutely 100% love, and it's the highest reorder rate, I will say, because I really like to not push people and be like, you have to do this forever. Like, I like to observe. Is this something that feels right for you? Do you want to continue it? And it's maca. So I'm saying that again broadly, but here's where I'd love to educate people. Maca actually also has different genes. So there are different forms of maca that are more aligned for where you are in life. So this company has a maca for men. It has a maca for those, let's say, in the family planning zone. There's one for perimenopause, and there's one for postmenopause. And they've done extensive research on it. This is another thing where I actually do go, okay, we're not just going with the herbalist's experience. We are really, really testing not only the genetic differences of why would I take this one versus that one, and we're also seeing and we're able to verify that this is helping, if not maintaining the hormone levels, quote unquote, naturally, because it's working at the brain level. We call this the hypothalamic pituitary axis. So it's this connection to say, hey, brain, keep making that yourself versus us having to give it to you, even if it's bioidentical. You give the body what it needs, it'll kind of go, oh, great, thanks. I'm done with that. You can keep supplying that for me. Whereas this continues to help the brain create it.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's like one of those where it was one where even when I like to take things first, and I noticed I was very lucky, I will say that I noticed the difference like right away. And then I'll tell people, I'll say, look, you'll either get right away benefits or it's going to take around a cycle or two, depending on if a woman is cycling consistently or not. So it might take let's say a box, right? That might be 30 to 45 days. You might need 2 of those before you then go, aha, yes, I am sleeping better. My mood is better. My libido is there. I never had fingernails before, like my hair, my fingernails, like I'm like, oh, thank you. And that's the other thing that I like about it is it has multiple benefits. Yes, you're getting the hormone balancing, but you're also, and that's all in the insert of the company. So yeah, I can help you with that too.
Are there any things that you cannot or won't help people with?
I am not the biggest fan of, I mean, I like to help people with their GI health around fertility, but I'm not the biggest like fertility expert, we'll say.
Okay.
Right. So I've had people who've come to me, they're on the fertility journey and they're focused on their gut and then they spontaneously get pregnant. I'm like, yay, but that can be a demographic that's like so into this has got to happen that I got to go, wait, like,
yeah,
I can't give you any guarantees, but generally happens naturally. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so I know that one of the things, I don't know your story about this, but we're gonna like switch gears, and I would love to have you share your UAP experience.
Yeah. So I was in Moab visiting this friend that I was speaking to, and they spend a lot of time outside. They're an insomniac. They drink their coffee out there. They have their tobacco ceremony out there. They spend a lot of time out there. So I'd go out and visit. And the first sighting, which it didn't have a phone or anything, but it was like, I pointed and I said, oh, look at that. Kind of like the trail of a jet engine.
Okay.
But it was like this fluorescent greenish color. So it stood out because you're like, wait a minute, that's not a jet.
Yeah.
And as I sat there and I said, look at that, I said, is that a, and by the time I said, no, that's not, she leapt out of her chair, ran inside, and I was like, oh, she's getting her phone. But meanwhile, I would have liked to have had the witness, because as she was gone, I saw the biggest, I caught, all I could describe it as was mothership. It was the side of them, and I was like, holy smokes. And it was pretty much that same green with these windows. And I ended up drawing it after, because I was just like, yeah, I was in this like state of, I wish you would have stayed to see see this. And she saw like the beginning of it. She's like, yeah, that's why I jumped up to get the phone. But then it also just went like behind, I called it behind a curtain. So it went very slowly. It wasn't, it was just like, and then went behind the curtain. And I immediately, my thought was, okay, I'll contact MUFON. So I did. And I filled out the form and, gave them the drawing, and there was a little bit like, yeah, sure. I'm also bummed out that I don't have the visual footage. Right. But it was this feeling that I had that really just still lingered over me. And I guess it was almost that like connection to that Merlinian technology. I mean, that's just the best way I can describe it, where it's like, okay, yes, you did see that. Yes, there's more. And there's a reason why you're just seeing a portion of this and nobody else was supposed to. Oh, and I must say, Moab also has dark skies. So so that was another bonus, just generally sitting out there in the evenings, but it really was just like so clear. I was definitely in the stunned. And I was still actually like, there's got to be somebody else who saw this with MUFON, right? I was kind of like, hey guys, you're going to give me like there was 3 of you, or some kind of follow-up.
Yeah.
But then it was, I think there were 2 other nights, one night in particular where my friend was also still with me, and we just saw more of the orb, the white orb, and have multiple videos. And of course she's on there going, what is that? What's going on? And I was like, well, yeah, it's clear. Isn't it clear to you that that's a UAP? And then she would say certain things, and it was almost like we were getting a response. And then when I would kind of more so speak to it, it would be a different response. And what I found fascinating that she was so baffled by for a long time after, she says, do you know how many hours and days and months I've spent outside? But the 2 times that you just chose to join me, we had these really profound, experiences. And at first I was like, oh yeah, sure. But I think after more so with our channeling and, all these other things that I've gone, oh yeah, I was being spoken to.
Yeah.
That was a message. That was for me. Sure, I can share it with others that aren't going to think I'm crazy and see the video and go, we got it. But it really was something I was meant to experience. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, and that's one thing that I do talk about, like when people come on the tour, because, not everyone's mind is ready to receive the vision of these craft. And so you can have 2 people sitting next to each other. One sees it, the other one doesn't.
Really?
Yeah. And I mean, and on our tours, the ones that we're seeing, everyone is seeing. They really are presenting themselves. But I had an experience back March of last year where no one else in my neighborhood saw anything. I mean, who knows? They probably weren't outside anyway. Right. But I had a beautiful experience with one that was across the street from my house, above the tree line, above my neighbor's house. And so, so it's all a personal experience, a personal journey. But the more that people are aware that, okay, yes, they do exist, and maybe that when they're shifting into a higher consciousness, higher frequency, you can see more. You can see through the dimensions more.
Yeah, that's what I felt like with the mothership, because I was like, and I think it was also like I didn't need to describe it, but it was so crystal clear to me what I saw. And I will just say that my mother saw an orb in Alaska in the 90s and was so stunned by it. And, she worked in a dental office, so she saw a lot of people, and she was telling everybody, and she was like, there were some people who were like, oh yeah, I've seen him on the Katsahine Flats, you know, or,
Yeah.
and then others who are like, ooh, you know, so it was nice that I was at least exposed to it. When you see somebody having this happened, I was like, well, I have to believe, you know, she's my mom. I didn't think there was something wrong with her. Right. But I
Right.
think that's interesting also how then I received it later. And we may
Yeah.
have been around the same age. I'll have to ask her. So
Yeah.
do you notice that there's an age factor by chance?
No.
Okay.
No, but I think it's really just, yeah, if you're open or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in our last little bit of time here, what else would you love to share with the audience about any wisdom or how you work with people or anything else?
Well, I think it's to say that there are doctors, if it's a title or, you know, whoever you're looking for, that we do believe you. We are open. We're here to help you. That's the main thing that I would like to say in all aspects. It's like you can find the person that's a frequency match for you, whether it's even specific to your health or opening your channel, receiving more. But also, I think sometimes when people are going through this, they will have things happen in their body that maybe a traditional or even a naturopathic doctor wouldn't understand. And so I just like to let people know that there is someone who will believe you, just have to find them.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, and what is your website and what socials are you on?
Website is Intuitive Edge Doctor, and people can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here with me, Melanie.
Thank
And very different kind of conversation than I have with other people because you're again my first naturopathic doctor, and then again you're so much more. But hopefully people enjoyed listening to this and got some new information.
I
So
hope so as well. Thank
yeah.
you.
And for those of you listening or watching, thank you for being here, and I'll see you next time on Connection to the Cosmos. Aloha.